Today, let's look at profession number 8 of 9. That is the Ranger. What is the best, most comfortable way of running around in standard PvE? The open world, story missions, general content, the vast majority of what there is to do in the game. What's the best way to go through? Well, Ranger's quite a complicated class, I'd actually say, with a lot of different things to think about, particularly when it comes to the new elite specialization, the Soulbeast, the fact that it's got the pets as an added element of buildcraft. Well, for me, I do think that Soulbeast is the best way to go forwards, and in this video I want to show you how. Let's open up with a bit of a montage of some of the stuff it's capable of, running around and mobbing and clearing lots of groups of enemies and maybe some more decidedly difficult encounters, and then we'll run through exactly how it works. So here's a few clips for you. Opening with a tiny bit of Corteria, I just want to show you the strength of our main attacks. And you'll see we pretty much 3-shot or 4-shot most things based on whether we get that one crit or not. This is in Ore, of course, at level 80 scale, fighting level 80 creatures. You see I'm using the axe. We'll talk a lot more about that in a minute when we get into the build section of the video. Axe is pretty good because it can AoE. It's got incapacitation effects that mean the couple of attacks that come towards you won't necessarily do anything. And the offhand isn't that great for killing random enemies. Most of them die too quick. But, I mean, that's not a big problem to have, right? You can, in some circumstances, end up pulling up lots of things into you and then blowing them up. But as you see, for most of these endgame areas in core, stuff just dies too quick. The other weapon set here, we have a lot of burst potential. So this is the Greatsword. We're also using some of our Soulbeast skills here, like Worldly Impact there. Everything I'll explain in a second. Greatsword's really nice if you've just got one enemy nearby. The downside is this one's a little bit more melee, so I don't tend to linger on this so much. But again, here we're at level 80 scale, the later areas of Frostgorge Sound, which I think the enemies we're fighting might be 79 on this one. But just a single Greatsword 2 tends to do well over 10,000 damage, and that's not even one of the main spikes on the builds. So you could just kind of run around juggling the Greatsword 2 into the Worldly Impacts or whatever else you like. The two actually synergize quite well because of a buff that we get, which again, I'll mention a little bit more of in a second. You also get a bit of mobility too. That's the skill 3 on the Greatsword. Compensates a little bit for the fact that you no longer have range and do need to move into melee. Pets can help there too. So going over to something actually challenging, Heart of Thorns Hero Challenge, meant for groups. We're going to solo it. I think I'm actually running out of these to demonstrate now. This one's the Vine Tooth. Now what's really cool on a Ranger is as long as you have your pet out, you pretty much don't ever take damage. Here you'll see that the boss isn't even trying to fight me. And a lot of players will just think merge. It's all about the DPS from merging. But you know, it's when I merge, I take damage. And then when I demerge, I'm no longer taking any damage and I can easily reset. That's something you do want to pay attention to on Ranger. And once you get used to the fact that you're pretty much invulnerable in a lot of circumstances as long as you're not merged in these kind of single target group events, you're going to be fine. I've obviously sped this footage up a little bit, but we do kill this boss really quickly, and it's thanks mostly due to the incredible over 10k hits. I can't believe people need squads to take this out when you look at a build like this. Then all the little bombers, we can kind of one-shot with our random axe attacks too afterwards. Moving over to Path of Fire for comparison. These are, of course, single-player designed ones, not group events, so we should be able to solo this quite quickly. But we can kind of get a sense of the speed. This footage is obviously not sped up whatsoever. Kind of an annoying one because he does blind you, but, you know, a couple of hits and he's dead. Last we can look at the Flame Djinn, which are incredibly difficult to fight outnumbered. I kind of cheat on this one. You see, I aggro this guy and we put so much CC on him, his break bar gets hit super low, and I want to get value out of my boons. We break his armor like instantly, so I take a random bit of damage on him while his armor's down, and we just kill it straight away. I mean, that's one of the things that this build's very good at, sudden spike potential. So then it's just a game of trying to get the rest of them and make it feel like an authentic 3v1, but it was probably a bit easier than it should have been for me here. You see the other guy back there is actually only just spawning. But so here you'll see, we are actually fairly squishy to these guys. I mean, what builds aren't? And I sustain my range and use my smoke scale back there to keep the aggro away from me. And again, if you just look at his break bar, it's draining down. Once one of their break bars is done, you can kind of kill it super quick. And we know that we can go aggressive probably when we're in the 1v2 and go for another merge later. But same situation as trying to solo that Heart of Thorns Hero Challenge. I'd actually say this is harder than that group event, to be honest, to deal with these. There I miss a really big attack, which actually does kind of punish me a bit. But we get a lot more break bar damage again from some of our other skills. big critting AoEs. This build actually has tons of stability that the Flame Djinn don't really interact with, so I don't sort of get to demonstrate that. That's the one thing these guys don't have. They have mobility, they have break bar, they have splash damage, they have condies, but they don't pressure you with stuns. So, I don't know, maybe ArenaNet designed it so some of the other Djinn do. And there you go. So, I don't know, I feel like that was a little bit of a cheat, so I do just go in and kill a couple more. And you'll see, again, the idea of when there's only one, how quickly we can spike it. The break bar comes up, I can take the bar down pretty quick. I actually used some of my burst beforehand there. And again, with a couple of missed crits there too, we still end up smashing them out with pretty big damage. So there you go. That's pretty much the way that the build operates. It's definitely more of a finesse-oriented build than some of the other open world builds I've shown you that are more about single attacks. Here you are, you know, pet swapping and pet merging and occasionally weapon swapping. But it's really not all that complicated for the vast majority of PvE. It's only when you get a little bit more pressured that you end up having to flit around a bit more. All of that I'll explain as the video commences. So if you like the way that this looks and want to be able to play Ranger as smoothly and comfortably as this in the open world, well, I'll get into the details just now for you. Let's do it. So Soulbeast is a pretty interesting one. You could go Druid, but I do think nowadays Druid is much more refined and focused towards that support playstyle, and there unfortunately is overshadowed in some ways by other things. So when it comes to running around alone, we're not often going to have things to support, and there's not that reason to go with Druid. If there was some concept of super squishy pets that were nonetheless really dangerous, and then we could Druid support those, I could maybe see a version of that for open world, but that really just doesn't exist. Core Ranger I think is perfectly viable too, a less complicated playstyle and still extremely strong, but I am going for Soulbeast just because I think it gives you that added extra kick, and if you've got the elite specializations, well, I do want to show off what is, in my opinion, the best way to go through. So yeah, that's the elite specialization we'll be running. I'm going to go through traits and all that good stuff very soon, but let's open up by talking about our weapons. So a big part of this build actually is going to be deciding what you want to hit people with. Do you want to use the classic Ranger longbow? Do you want to go some kind of condition playstyle using the short bow, which by the way is very strong? I personally am not showing off Condi builds right now, but maybe further down the line. Or do you want to use some of their other weapons like the Warhorn or the Sword and so on? What I've chosen is axe as the main set. These are the main weapons that I'll be going for, dual wielding axes. That'll become very clear why as the video goes along. There's various trait synergies and things, but one of the main reasons I like the main hand axe is just the auto. Ricochet. Let's check out how this skill works. We just fire an axe out at 900 range at fairly quick speed. Now if we give ourselves quickness, which this build is a monster for, we actually throw the axes extremely quick. Now, what's cool about this isn't just, you know, one attack every time one of these axes comes flying out at the speed of light, but they bounce too. Every time one of these axes comes out, it has a chance of being a physical projectile, but it also gives us might. So if you caught how I like to play Renegade in the open world, this is a very similar situation where we can essentially run around, as you saw in the montage there, autoing things down and chunking them for big damage, turbocharging our might as we go. Ricochet is really, really good. It's a little bit worse in single target environments, but if you've got two targets, it becomes twice as good. So you can like double hit at this attack rate. Ricochet is brilliant, and a big part of this build is just sustaining that gap, having your pet maybe taking some aggro for a little while you just throw these out and the target dies very quickly. The other skills are kind of just bonuses. Next we have Split Blade, which honestly isn't the greatest feeling thing on this build. These are 5 axes at once, but their damage is a little bit lower in exchange for doing some bleed. I tend to prefer this on more condition or hybrid playstyles, which I'm not actually talking about here. But you can throw this out in point-blank melee as kind of a big shotgun attack, and that's always kind of nice. And then finally, Winter's Bite, which we have actually traded. But what this will do is if we, say, throw this at the sand line, it's another axe similar to the auto, but it actually explodes doing chill and is AoE all on its own. So this one will be 5 targets. And what's really cool about Winter's Bite is it's actually very, very big damage. If you look at the modifier there, it says 1,400. And as we build our might, you'll notice here just by autoing, we've got over 20 might. As we build it, you see it gets closer and closer to 2,000 on a non-crit, which is really huge. So A big part of Axe is just running around utilizing this. Then we do get a choice of an offhand. You could go with the Warhorn in the offhand if you really wanted. That would give you more fury and swiftness and stuff, but we have tons of that anyway, as you're about to see. It would give you a bird attack, which has a very cool synergy with one of the Soulbeast elites, but we're not running that. So I don't really worry about that. Dagger is a little bit low impact, even though it had a bit of a rework, and Dagger is generally better on condition builds, which we don't worry about. Or you could just go Axe offhand. Now, Axe offhand has a lot of strong stuff. First of all, we got the Path of Scars. So we fire this axe out. It will hit twice, do big break bar damage, or pull a whole group of enemies into us. And this can allow us to get through break bars, bull things up for setting up our skill 5, Whirling Defenses. And so this is kind of a very classic, iconic ranger skill. It was actually a Guild Wars 1 ability that they reworked in Guild Wars 2. This is a monster, all right? It gives you retail, which we don't worry about, but it puts 12 vuln up, which is excellent, as we are a little bit vuln light on this build. And this gives you, you know, vuln caps at 25. So if you're getting 12 from this one skill, you're like halfway there already, right? So it does all of that, but look at the damage too. 12 hits, which roll up to 7,800 before we're looking at crits or any of that other stuff. This is an insane skill. It's whirling at the same time, and it's reflecting projectiles at the same time. This is one of those skills that just sneakily got buffed and buffed and buffed and buffed and buffed, and is really insane. If you were to play this skill in really sort of structured high-end PvE stuff, you can see it rolls well over 100k. It's a really, really awesome thing that you're going to be hitting 50k plus all on your own as you run around in the open world. Really fantastic. So the idea is you can use Path of Scars to pull a bunch of enemies in that then are all getting hit by Whirling Defenses, because it will hit 5 targets. You could even open that whole thing up with a Winter's Bite, so they're all chilled and they can't even walk away from you very quickly. So Axe is just nasty, and the vast majority of your time on this build, you could just stay on Axe. You don't have to do anything else. You can roll through these, you can use your utilities, as I'll show you in a second, and you can just kind of, you know, spam your auto attacks when they stop blocking or evading or whatever. This is a big veteran guy. We can use the Whirling Defenses, and look, before we've even rolled too much, that was a 28k Whirling Defenses right there. And you can stay on Axe forever. I will say, though, you do get another weapon set, of course, and I do think there is something useful you can run on it. For me, it's the Greatsword. This is the other weapon that I'm recommending. You could put a longbow on there. I've got no problem with longbow. There's a bit more break bar on it. There's good range. If you have a longbow on your other set, you can kind of open from far away. So feel free to try the longbow. But I do like greatswords. I've just got a standard air and force greatsword here on Berserker stats. The thing I like to do with greatsword is the maul into hilt bash into maul combo, which basically allows you to just spike a target down when it's kind of low. Basically what you do is you run around using your axe skills, as I've described, and then when it feels like the target might die and you've already got loads of might and you don't really care about just autoing, maybe you know, you open up, maybe you use the skill 4 and the skill 5. Right, I mean, he's going to die, and I've got to be very careful with it. They'll die in, like, one animation. I need to be near a veteran. But when they're low, you can just quickly swap to the other set and hit Greatsword 2. Right? So, Maul is just a massive, meaty hit, okay? Look at that. No might, no nothing. We're almost at 2k already. You just slam that down, and that will probably kill them. If it doesn't kill them, you can follow up with a hilt bash, which is a stun, and this instant refreshes your maul as well. So you can go maul, hilt bash, maul, and that's just a really good finisher. Once they're finished off, you're on Greatsword, and you want to break combat, well, you can use the Greatsword 3 in the meantime to just charge off. So this is what I like Greatsword for. I don't really use the counterattack too often on Greatsword. I don't really use the auto attacks very much. I just use it as a bit of a finisher set or a bit of a mobility set, and that's how I like to play it. You could go longbow, though. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you're a ranger that feels like you really need to have a ranged skill because, you know, you're misinterpreting what the title of the class is about, go for it. That's totally cool with me, and you can play that. The other nice thing about Greatsword, really, is that while we're on Axe, we're pretty much mostly projectile. I mean, the 5 isn't really projectile, but all the other ones are. And sometimes you will find stuff that blocks projectiles or does annoying stuff. Like these sand lions themselves, the reason they block so much is because they destroy projectiles specifically. So when you're in situations like that, that's where Greatsword can be pretty nice too. If you go longbow on your other set, then you're not going to get that advantage. You're still going to be pretty much projectile locked, except like barrage. So yeah, that's what I like to do for the weapons. Let's talk about utility skills as well now. So the right-hand side of our bar. Now, you'll notice what's quite interesting about these here is none of them are seeking to do damage. The way I have set my utility skills up is that every single one of them is about giving us boons and is about augmenting our damage. It's all just about quality of life through boon uptime and passive effects. Nothing here is like an animation that will do a strike or whatever, which you can see on a lot of the other builds. It means that the utilities can be kind of spammy, but there is a lot of rhyme and reason to how and when you might like to use them. So let's get through it. First of all, we'll start with the heal skill, We Heal as One. Now, this is our command. The first big thing that's nice about this is actually one of the lowest cooldown heal skills for Ranger. I don't want to aggro that certain line, so let's move over. It's one of the lowest cooldown heal skills, which means that you can, wow, we managed to aggro him anyway. Fine, we're gonna drop down. Which means that you can use it in a fight, and then you're not standing around waiting for ages to use it in another one. You can just go charging on straight as soon as possible. Its heal itself isn't actually that great, but what we really want is the special perk on it, which is this: that we gain our pet's boons, and our pet gains our boons. So the idea here is that when we give ourselves a ton of might with Ricochet, if we use the heal skill just to heal ourselves, now the pet is going to be super high damage. Or equally, if we manage to give the pet a ton of boons, then we will get those ourselves. Now that's the really cool bit. It allows us to basically get double effectiveness out of a lot of our boon stuff. And so let's look at another utility skill to really demonstrate this in action. Quickening Zephyr. Now, this is a stun break. I do like actually having a stun break on most of my PvE builds. However, we don't often use this for stun break. We're going to be casting this very readily as much as we can. And all this is giving a quickness. When we cast this, we get quickness, and our pet gets quickness too, as well as giving super speed to the both of us. Super speed isn't a boon, but quickness is. So, when I press this, I get quickness, the pet gets quickness, and you see it's got a certain duration. But if I heal while this is up, it will increase the duration of that quickness again, because I'm going to get it back. I'm going to take it off of the pet and give it back to myself, and the same will happen here. So we juggle the quickness using the heal, right? And in this way, Quickening Zephyr is now a stronger utility skill because of the heal that we're using. Now, I do want to be clear. The way that this skill works is it doesn't copy the exact boon. So, for example, when we press Quickening Zephyr, it says it's going to be 7 seconds of quickness. So if I do Quickening Zephyr and then instantly We Heal as One, does that mean I'll get 14 seconds of quickness? Well, actually, the answer to that is no. It's like a flat amount. The pet is on guard, but it's killing everything. I'm going to make it avoid combat completely. I guess these things are just aggroing on us, and the pet knows before I do. So here, if you watch very closely, when I hit this and then I quickly heal, we won't actually double the duration of quickness. We're still only at 7 seconds. It's a flat amount, all right? So if the game detects that the boon exists, it will give you what is listed when we mouse over. So if the pet had quickness when I use this skill, then I'm going to get 2¼ seconds quickness. Or if I had quickness when I use the skill, then he's going to get 2¼ seconds. It doesn't actually matter if I had 100 seconds. It won't copy the full 100. It will ever only do the 2¼ And then that's the same for the regeneration, which you can see listed there is at 5, or the Aegis, which is listed at 5, and so on and so on and so on. Nonetheless, it is still a very cool skill, and it will detect stack counts, which we'll talk about in a second. More on the boon stuff. We do have a Soulbeast skill that I love here. It's called Moa's Stance. This is instant activation, but it's not a stun break, so do be aware of that. But basically, when we press it, we give ourselves Fury for ages, Swiftness for ages, Regen for ages, Protection for ages, and it puts us into the Moa's Stance. The Moa's Stance increases all of our boon duration by 66%. Okay, now, in terms of raw attributes, that is a completely bonkers nuts number. To get 66% boon duration, you'd have to build so much concentration into your gear, it's insane. And yet, as a Soulbeast, we just have this one button, and it's like we've equipped a ton of new gear based on concentration. It's really nuts. So what that means now is if we start with a Moa's Stance when we use Quickening Zephyr, the quickness is much higher on ourselves and on our pet. And also, it means that these boons that Moa's Stance has given us, I think, will be increased duration straight away. And also, it means all of these boons will be longer. So if you have a look here, if I just go Moa's Stance, Quickening Zephyr, and Heal, we've got, like, crazy boons here, right? They're just sitting around for a very long time. And we'll see that we get even more boon splash from this. So that's kind of the idea here. We just roll these through, and you can chain and combo them together as best you can. But in general, pressing them as you're in fights is going to be pretty good, even if you're doing it mostly off of cooldown. Another big one here is going to be our Elite. This is Strength of the Pack, our final boon splash. It's another command. Rampage with your pet, gaining stability, fury, and swiftness. You and your pet also gain might, give might to each other whenever you auto-attack. Or just attack in general, sorry. So, while we're under this, Ricochet will actually be giving us 2 might, because it will give us the might from the Ricochet and the might from the Strength of the Pack. And then that will copy through the pet as well. So, to do it all together, you know, you can just use this, and this. And when we use our heal, you'll notice I have 20 stability for 12 seconds here. All these boons, our might, like, pretty much will go to 25 super fast. This guy's invulnerable for some reason. And, you know, our pet wasn't even attacking there or doing anything. But if the pet was attacking, our might would have gone even faster, higher up. That's before we look at Soulbeast and some of the Soulbeast traits, which will bounce these boons even further. So that's just kind of the way that I like to play it. It's very much, you know, I don't think that you need to be going really crazy and really precise about a ton of different skills here in PvE. I think you can just use these utilities and combo them together. The last one is Sikkim. So this is another modifier, but is not boon related, okay? So when we press this, it will make our pet attack. It will be as though we press our F1, our attack my target thing. The pet's going to go rushing in, and it will reveal the target. Isn't very relevant for PvE, but it gives the pet way more damage and movement speed. 40%. Look at that. 40% damage and 40% movement speed. That's nuts. 40% modifier. I think this is the single highest damage modifier in the game. Seriously. Actually, doesn't a new warrior trait maybe have a slightly higher one, but is about to be nerfed in competitive formats? Anyway, this is really, really, really crazy. So, what's very cool about this, first of all, is just bumping the pet up, but as a soul beast, it has a particular added benefit. If we merge, when we press Sikkim, and we need a target to do it, you'll notice I get the Sikkim. So now I can have 25 might and all that good stuff, and I have a 40% modifier. So look at this. These random quickness autos that we throw out, stacking up to like 5k easily, and that's before even our might is fully ramped, right? So we just auto. And, you know, I haven't even used any other skills here except the auto. Actually, maybe I opened with a Winter's Bite earlier. And the stuff will die super quickly just from us pressing these utilities, which also don't have cast times. Like, these 3 in the middle don't even have cast times, so you can very comfortably just hit them and keep moving. The only thing you need to be careful about on this build, and this is why I've left Sikkim for last, is try to only use Sikkim while you are merged. If you use it when you're not merged, it's the pet that's going to get it. And the pet might not attack as fast as you, and might be slow to retarget, and might waste its time using crowd controls and other things. So, and that's true for whatever pet you might like here. I've been showing you the smoke scale, but, you know, we could easily be on a bird or something else. It is cool to use this skill even when you're not merged sometimes, but generally I would try to avoid it and make sure you give yourself that big modifier. Because as a Soul Beast, we get special Soul Beast skills, which I guess we can go over now, actually. Like this, Worldly Impact, okay? This is a giant attack. Massive explosion of damage. And if you have 25 might and you've given yourself Sikkim when you do it, this is a well over 10k hit very comfortably a lot of the time. Your pet cannot do Worldly Impact. Only you can do Worldly Impact while you're merged. So you want to try and get your own value out of this. So that's the way that I like to use the utility skills. There is another little thing to talk about here now with We Heal as 1 in terms of being merged. Sometimes it's better to We Heal as 1 outside of being merged. So if I do Strength of the Pack and I give my pet 10 stab and myself 10 stab, when I use We Heal as 1, we'll get 20, like you saw earlier. But if I'm already merged and now I do the Strength of the Pack heal combo, I only get 11. Because I'm getting that extra 1 stack from the thing, but it doesn't work the same while we're merged, right? It detects that we are the pet, but it won't give us the same amount. So if you want to run around with like crazy duration of 20 stab, and I think some other boons might be affected in a similar way, maybe might works in the same way, you want to try to use We Heal as 1 when your pet has lots of boons, when you're not merged. Some people do recommend with Soul Beast to stay forever merged, but I think dipping in and out every now and then is worthwhile, even if it just means so that you can swap to something else for a bit of utility and go from there. So there you go. That's what I like with the weapon skills and the utilities. Now let's look at the pets themselves. I have gone with, first of all, the smoke scale, as you can tell here. The reason I like the smoke scale is because it, first of all, is a ferocious pet, which means that while we are merged with it, it increases our power and ferocity. Not all pets do that, but this means we have higher damage, higher crit chance, and then the Sikkim, and then all the other stuff. There are plenty of ferocious pets you could, of course, go for. Ferocious pets are also what gives you Worldly Impact, and Worldly Impact is a really good AoE cleave skill. You can use the Worldly Impact, and then they're almost dead, and then that's when you Greatsword swap, and you Greatsword 2, and then 5, and then 2 again. You can do that all with Sikkim on you. You can do it all with Quickness on you. Like, look at how quick this casts with Quickness. And things will die very quickly. It's such a strong combo. But also, the Smoke Scale has some other really useful things for open world. First of all, the Smoke Assault. So, this does damage, gives us might, and it evades while we do it. So, here, let me show you here on this hyena. The hyena is going to aggro, try and attack us as he jumps in and he comes towards us. But while we're in Smoke Assault, they can't strike us while we're doing this. Oh, we seem to have lagged out in the middle of it. That was really weird. It does lots of damage, and it's just periods of you being invuln. This is actually a fairly squishy build, I would say. I'm super laggy right now. This is really weird. It's actually quite a squishy build, so having the Smoke Assault on there is quite nice. But even also Takedown is quite nice, and that's because of a trait. This is basically just a CC. Good for Break Bar. And there's a little trait that you've seen is just popped on our active effects, which we'll look at when we get to the trait section in a second. So all three of these skills are generally pretty useful, and it's a ferocious pet. Then he'll double them up, and he'll do his own version of them over here. The other pet that I run, again, it's a bit like how I primarily like to use Axe on this build, and then I'll swap to Greatsword every now and then. I treat the pets the same way. Largely, I like to stay on the Smoke Scale, but sometimes I like to swap to the Owl, or any of the other birds. You could go a ferocious bird, or you could actually go Gazelle as well. So let's open with Gazelle. Gazelle might actually be my main recommendation here. Oh, he's at the very bottom. He's all the way down here. So the Gazelle, again, is another ferocious pet that does really wild damage, and means that while you're in combat, you can swap to this thing, and it won't matter too much. If we look at the actual Gazelle's stats here, it's got the head toss with over 2,000 damage. It's got the head butt, which is pretty good. It's got the kick with over 3,000 damage, over 5 packets, and it has the charge with 2,200 damage. It's got a lot of really heavy hit. This is probably the most overpowered pet in the game, okay? It's just not got as much quality of life. So you could run the Gazelle, and the main thing I would swap to it for is when a fight is nearing its conclusion, I can dip in and I can charge out using the charge skill. Literally, it's called charge, right? So you do some travel damage with it, and impact damage, and daze if you really want all of those things. But basically, it's just that bit of movement. It also has Worldly Impact, which you might think is good, having 2 sources. But generally, you would have already Worldly Impacted against while using your Smoke Scale. And then that means when you swap into this, sometimes the skill's not going to be there because it's still on cooldown. And that feels kind of bad. But it's the mobility that I really like, and then its own combat effects, right? So this pet, if we buff this guy up, I'm super happy to give this guy Sikkim, right? Like, he will charge through and do just insane damage to things. I don't care if the Gazelle gets Sikkim. It can do what it wants, and as it executes its abilities, as long as stuff doesn't kite out of it, it'll be fine. It tends to be good against more stationary targets. Anything that moves kind of messes it up. But a more sort of inflated version of this, when you're just treating it as utilities, there are the birds. I like the Owl in particular. So the Owl is a supportive pet, and what that means is we get a different skill. This is Spiritual Reprieve. And this is 4,235 heal. This is a big heal. This is 2/3 the strength of our main heal skill. That's a big heal, guys. Basically, you get to add another heal skill to the build. It gives you resistance at the same time. It's on a separate cooldown to Worldly Impact, so it will always be there for you. And this has a more reliable movement skill on a lower cooldown. So this time we get Swoop. We get Swiftness on the Quickening Screech, and we can swoop around. So if you're using one of the birds with the Greatsword, look at all this movement we can do, right? You're not going to have any problems disengaging if you feel even slightly vulnerable in any story mission or boss fight or open world engagement. You can always just pet swap, start swooping away, weapon swap, again, start swooping away, because you actually have 2 different skills called swoop here. They're actually different skills, but they have the same name. So, yeah, even without a mount, and once you've created this massive gap, obviously, you could mount up and move away on those as well. Don't forget that some of the newest instances in Icebrood Saga have that bitter chill effect, which actually removes mounts in story instances. So we may be going back to a world where a lot of the big campaign missions, you can't mount anyway, meaning stuff like this is a little bit more value. So I actually do like this just for that very pure idea of this is a utility pet I tend to not like to go into. So all told, you can linger on a single pet, and you can linger on a single weapon set. That would be Axe and the Smoke Scale. and be fine pretty much for good. Or you could even just stay on the Gazelle if you like. But those are my main recommendations, the main options that I think you have available to you. So moving on from the pets, now let's look at traits and see how some of these synergies really start going a little bit nuts. And so I'm going to start off by talking about marksmanship. Of course, we aren't actually using a bow, but that doesn't mean marksmanship isn't good. Marksmanship actually still offers a lot of really strong damage modifiers for us, and that's mostly what I've just picked it for. So the miners are all about this opening strike mechanic. So when we start the fight, we have this little arrow icon on us, and it means that our first strike is called an opening strike, and that's what the first miner does. Opening strike will give 5 vulnerability right at the start of the fight. So when the fight begins, we get 5. We've got another 12 over here. That's 18 that we can get pretty quickly. The other miner is cripple for our opening strike. So we cripple and we vuln. The cripple will be useful in a minute. And finally, our opening strikes will always crit. So the first hit of any fight will always be a crit. For that reason, I do recommend, and you know, just you want to use your big skills first so they get on cooldown quick. For this reason, I do think opening with a Winter's Bite is a very good idea, so that you guarantee the crit on the big strike of the Winter's Bite as you're then gap closing. Maybe you can get your Path of Scars going or something like that. So that's what the miners are really. They're just the opening strike mechanic. Now for what we've selected. I've gone with Hunter's Gaze here. This is giving us might whenever we strike a foe, based on how low that foe is. So when the foe is below a quarter health, every second we give ourselves 3 might. This trait alone is enough to stack us ridiculous quantities of might. In the open world, and for story, the truth is most enemies are quite squishy, and the amount of time that you will spend hitting something below a quarter of its health is actually very minimal, because they'll be dead in 2, maybe 3 hits anyway. So don't overrate this trait. It's not the greatest in the world, but it still gives us might when they're below half health and when they're below 3/4 health, which just helps us to get to that 25 all that much quicker. The other really nice choice would be Clarion Bond for you here, which is Fury, Might, and Swiftness. The thing is, I've got so many sources of Fury, Might, and Swiftness, and that's on Pet Swap as well, which we don't like to do too much, that it really doesn't matter. You know, our Elite's given it. I think I'm actually on Pack Runes on this video, which really isn't the best recommendation, but they're like Fury, Might, and Swiftness. There's Fury, Might, and Swiftness all over the place, so you don't have to worry too much. The other one here is Stone Form. This means when we go below half health, we actually become invulnerable. It's got a fairly long cooldown of 70 seconds. It's still nice because it's 5 seconds of invulnerability. Now, I don't know what your perspective is as you watch this video, dear viewer, but 5 seconds of Signet of Stone, to me, is a really ludicrous duration. A very long time to be invulnerable to flat damage. You wouldn't be invulnerable to condition damage, but it's PvE, where really, there isn't that much condition damage that ever attacks you. So you don't have to worry very much. I would just go for this if you are feeling like you're even a little bit vulnerable. Giving up the might isn't that big of a deal if you're using your utilities regularly enough. So much stuff is given might. I mean, even like the Smoke Assault is giving might. So there you have it. The next one I've chosen is Farsighted here. This is Ranger weapon skills do increase damage by 5% all the time. And if we are at a certain range, over 600, then they'll do 10% increased damage. So this is a nice 10% modifier for you. And we do get value out of our axe. Our axe skills are 900 range, and that trait means if we're over 600, we get the extra damage. Now, you do want to be careful about this, because when I run at this hyena and I attack it, the hyena's going to come towards me. And if I instantly merge with my pet, the hyena will it will deny us that extra 5% damage. So sometimes it might be nice to leave the pet out for a second, so the hyena stays back there and we can keep over 600. That 300 range gap is smaller than you might think, so you do be a little bit careful, but I mean, it's just an extra 5% damage if you're thinking about it. In general, this is just more damage all the time. The other options here are actually kind of nice. British Seals we don't worry about because we're not on Signets, but Moment of Clarity is giving us an attack of opportunity if we interrupt. So now don't confuse this attack of opportunity with the opening strike mechanic that's already in this marksmanship line. I actually kind of don't like this trait from a design perspective because it muddies the waters. Attacks of opportunity we can get from this trait on CC, or it actually just does exist as a mechanic on one of the weapons, and that's Greatsword. I never mentioned this earlier, but when you press Greatsword 2, then you are giving your pets this attack of opportunity. Attack of opportunity gives your pet 50% increased damage on its next hit. Well, what this trait does is it lets us get our own attack of opportunity whenever we land a CC. So you could use like the smoke scale takedown into a worldly impact. It's pretty nice and it's a big burst. The funny thing is though, as a soul beast, if we merge with the pet, whenever we randomly Greatsword 2, we will give ourselves the attack of opportunity anyway, because we're a soul beast and we're merged and we count as our own pet. So this marksmanship trait really isn't necessary if you're a soul beast, because you can already do the combos on your own. You can just be merged, you can maul, worldly impact, and you'll do tons of damage. Or you could do maul, hilt bash, maul, worldly impact, and get lots of modifiers that way. So really, I don't think that the trait is that important, but you could cheese out even more big spikes if you want with it. In general though, for the trait, I like to stay far-sighted. Then finally, for the Grandmaster, again, there's kind of some options. Lead the Wind, we don't really worry about if we're not running Longbow. Remorseless is okay. Whenever we gain Fury, we get another opening strike. And all our opening strikes now do 25% increased damage. So if we run this, our first Winter's Bite will hit really hard, and then we're going to keep giving ourselves opening strikes back. So here on this build, I'm actually on pack runes. So what you guys will notice here is, I've got to find a target that no one else is hitting. We'll go over to this. I'm going to Winter's Bite, spend this, then my pack runes are going to give me Fury, and I'll get it back straight away. So I actually get 2 in a row. Do you see this here? I still have opening strike. So now I can do it again, right? And when we use our elite and when we get Fury and all these other places, it keeps going. So honestly, you might think that that Grandmaster is completely irrelevant because, you know, it feels like, oh, why would I care about just the one hit? But it's actually really quite good if you're on a build that's splashing so much Fury on yourself. And I wouldn't completely overlook it. However, my main recommendation is Predator's Onslaught, which just says that we do 15% more damage all the time, every ability, as long as they have some kind of movement impairing effect on them. So that is some hard CCs, like Stun, Taunt is on there, Daze is on there, and we do have those. Like, again, if you look at your Greatsword combo, when you hilt bash someone, you're gonna, so we do the maul, the hilt bash will put a stun or something up, then the next one, we do get our Grandmaster trait available on it. But also, it's even some soft CCs on there, like Cripple and like Chill. So this is a great build for running Ghost Pepper Poppers. The first video in this playlist, I talked about all the remotely useful sigils and foods and things in PvE. Ghost Pepper Poppers mean that we just chill as we strike. And, well, there you go, you get this trait. And also, remember, Winter's Bite is a chilling skill. So you open with the Winter's Bite for all these reasons, but also it puts chill on, which means that we're getting Predator's Onslaught all the time. I'm actually even running a Sigil of Incapacitation on this particular setup. I don't know whether it's particularly my favorite way to go, but Incapacitation will mean we just randomly cripple as we're fighting. So that cripple, again, keeps the Moment of Clarity going, and drains break bars. So I really, really like, not Moment of Clarity, sorry, Predator's Onslaught. So, keeping that going with a Sigil of Incapacitation is kind of fun. Keeps the break bars going down. So yeah, it's just all damage, really. And that's what I like to run in Marksmanship. The next line that we'll be looking at is Beast Mastery. So as a Soul Beast, Beast Mastery is always going to be good because all the stuff in Beast Mastery will affect us when we are merged. All right, so you can look at them, not just the pet changes anymore. They are changes for us too. First of all, we've got Pack Alpha. Our pet attributes are improved. And our pet skills gain recharge reduction. Well, so that means more power, more condition damage, more precision, more toughness, more vitality for 150 for all of those. And then when we're merged, we get all of them. So as you can see here, when I'm not merged, I have 15,922 health. And then when I merge, we're going to see that goes up to like 17,000 because we are getting the vitality from Pack Alpha here, right? We get all of this. So that's huge. So for an X slot, I've actually got the wrong one teched. This one's okay, though. It's Potent Ally. This is a lot like Hunter's Gaze. Remember, Hunter's Gaze was give us might the lower the target went. Well, Potent Ally is very similar. It's whenever we critically hit, our pet gets might. And whenever our pet critically hits, we get might, which is nice. It's basically a mini version of the elite, and it's okay, but it's probably a bit too much might bounce. This is not actually what I'm recommending, even though it's been selected while I've been pressing H so far. There's also Go for the Eyes, which is a bit of blind. Again, I don't think it's that relevant, but it's some nice quality of life. What's really good, though, here is Resounding Timber. Commands now apply additional boons and gain reduced recharge. So let's remember here, when I looked at our utility skills, our heal is a command, and now comes back every 16 seconds. Sick'em is a command, and is now cooling down quicker. Quickening Zephyr isn't, but the Elite is also a command. And now the Elite has gone from quite a high cooldown to just every 60 seconds. In addition, they all now give us regen and swiftness, which is just more boons that's going to be getting bounced by more of our stuff, more. So you're going to have pretty much infinite regeneration on this build as long as you're running this trait. And that does count for something for some of your resustain. You'll see I've got over 50 seconds of it here as we just roll these through. So don't sort of ignore this just because it doesn't look like there's any damage on it. The fact that you can now Sick'em more regularly, this fact you can now boon bounce more regularly, keep the stability up more. The stability up time is actually really high on this build if you use a mower stance, strength of the pack, and then you're traded for the cooldown. Resounding Timber is really good. The next minor is Loud Whistle. While our health is above the threshold, our pet does more damage, and pet swap gains reduced cooldown. We like being able to pet swap more, that's brilliant. But then also, when merged, that means we basically have a Scholar Rune for free while merged, right? Our damage is 10% higher as long as we're high health because we're merged, right? Again, which is why these opening Winter's Bites, you can see, hit so hard so instantly. So that's the Loud Whistle. Next, I like to take Natural Healing. This is our pet recovers health each interval, but that means that while merged, we are getting health each interval. So we have pretty much permanent regeneration, and on top of that, we now have this little Natural Healing while merged, which you can stay merged for the vast majority of this build. So that's very nice. Some of these other ones are okay, by the way. Greatsword and spear stuff doing more damage if you have the Greatsword and the other swap, and they cool down quicker. And then a bit of weakness as well when you use the beast skill is also not bad. If you're running both of these, you have like pretty much every soft CC in the game. You've got cripple, you've got chill, you've got blindness, you've got weakness, and you're going to drain those break bars super quick. Then finally, we've got pet's prowess for the minor. Our pet moves faster and does more damage. So that's 30% move speed, and it's 300 ferocity. While merged, yeah, we get that. So here's the thing about this build. I really don't think swiftness is even that important. It's kind of fun to have, but the truth is, while merged, we are almost moving at swiftness levels anyway. And we can pretty much always be merged. So definitely don't run any kind of 25% move speed runes or anything like that on this build. You don't have to worry about move speed anywhere, because just from being Beast Mastery Soulbeast while merged, you're just running around so fast. Freaking Choya, man. They won't leave us alone. So, by the way, 300 ferocity. You'll actually notice that Pack Alpha gave us a ton of attributes. It didn't give us ferocity, but now we get the ferocity, and twice as strong. This was only 150. This one's double that. So it's just massive crit damage while we are merged. Finally, we've got the Grandmaster. And again, I do actually think there's kind of some choices. First, you could taunt when you use a beast skill. Again, that's even more break bar drain if you want it. That would also proc some of your stuff up here. But I don't really worry about too much because it's a long cooldown and you don't use beast skills that much. Next, you've got lesser Quickening Zephyr, which is more quickness for you whenever you swap. But we actually have plenty of quickness already, so I wouldn't worry. Or you've got Homed Axes. So this is even more ferocity. It's gain a bit of ferocity always, and then a bit more if you have an axe. Slightly different to the warrior version. We are getting 240 ferocity. On top of all of this ferocity, on top of the power here, you can see how many modifiers Ranger ends up getting. Then also it reduces all the cooldowns of these, and this is what made our Winters by AoE. So there's really nasty openings with the AoE, that's actually coming from this trait. So this is just a very easy choice to just bump your damage, to make sure you get as many Path of Scars going as possible, to make sure that you can use the 5 as much as possible. You'll see here that I've actually taken 2 lines, and pretty much both of them are fully just charging our damage up really hard, and they're very good for that. I mean, actually, the Beast Mastery line is doing stuff for our healing as well, but where it seeks to improve our damage, it really improves it big time. So yeah, that's Beast Mastery. That's the way I like to run it. So finally, we have Soulbeast. Now, in Soulbeast, there are some options, and actually one thing I'm not too certain on, so maybe you guys can leave some comments about it, but let's roll on through. So first, there's just a minor describing how we can now merge and the fact that we have beast skills. For the first slot, I really don't recommend Unstoppable Union. It's not that useful in PvE, and we want to use the merging more about aggressively than instead of just responding to stun breaking. But of the top 2, they both actually are pretty good. First, there's Live Fast, which is what I'm recommending. When we use a beast ability, we give ourselves quickness and fury. So this is an extra bit of quickness on top of the Quickening Zephyr and, you know, our bouncing of the quickness from We Healers 1. And this allows us to sustain it nice and high. So what you can do is, once you've opened the fight, you can use your Mower Stance QZ, Worldly Impact, and now use your heal. And you're up to 15 seconds of quickness here. which is a pretty good duration. Now, you can do it that way, but the other trait is Fresh Reinforcement. Entering beast mode grants us the boons affecting our pet. Now, if you run this trait, what you can do is stay in combat with the pet fighting alongside you for just that little bit longer. Try and give him some boons, say, and Quickening Zephyr from the elite and whatnot, and then merge, and you might end up with a bit more quickness overall, maybe. It kind of depends. I mean, this trait gives you 3.5 seconds whenever you use a beast skill. This one will copy 3 seconds of quickness over, so it's slightly less duration. I think you can use beast skills a little bit more regularly than merge out and then merge back in. This one just feels a bit more comfortable to me, a bit more regular, so that's what I go with. But if you guys have another opinion, you can let me know in the comments. But yeah, so live fast. Next we have a miner. We do more damage while we have fury. Well, that's good because we've got fury all over the place on this build. Next, I like Essence of Speed, which is more quickness synergy. Whenever we get quickness, we increase the duration of all the other boons affecting us. So, check this out. If I use Stance and the Elite, when I use Quickening Zephyr, if you look at my protection, the protection refreshed, right? And so, you know, and you can... We don't actually give the pet protection here, so when we use the heal, we didn't get it back. But using this, it means when I then go for the early Worldly Impact, do you see how Worldly Impact refreshed all my boons there? It's pretty nice, and so all those little quickness sources do end up adding up. For that reason, unlike most open world PvE builds, I do actually recommend the Sigil of Agility if you really are weapon swapping a lot, because the Sigil of Agility will give you another little packet of quickness when you say swap into the Greatsword, which will refresh all of your boons. Having one on GS is actually pretty good. I haven't gone to the length on this video of doing it, but I really do think that's a good choice, because then that means if you've got just a bit of might that might be about to drop, when you weapon swap, it will all refresh right for the big whack when you come in. It's a nice choice. The other choices aren't really that great here. There's Predator's Cunning, which is Life Siphon whenever you poison, but we're not really running a Condi setup. That would be a video for a later date. Or Second Skin, which is while we have prot, our incoming conditions drop off us quicker. But this is like, we're in PvE, as I said before. There's really not that much reason to shed conditions here, so I don't worry about that one. The last minor is whenever we do a CC, we get twice as vicious, which gives us 5% damage and 5% Condi damage. Do you remember earlier in the video, I mentioned while merged that we have takedown? Well, this is what I was talking about. The takedown will knock a target down, thus guaranteeing your Worldly Impact lands, but also it will give us twice as vicious, right? So when I use takedown, we'll see a little bright green icon will appear, and then we can Worldly Impact with a 5% modifier. If you just saw there, we did 6,000 damage on a non-crit, all right? If that had crit, it would have been ludicrously high, right? We just did 14k damage casually with Maul there, all right? And twice a vicious kind of rolls into that, right? It's going to last for 10 seconds, and that's a good duration for you. Finally, looking at the Grandmasters, there is a definite choice, okay? Now, my main recommendation is this: Oppressive Superiority. We do increased damage to foes at a lower health percent than us. So, if we open with a Winter's Bite, he's going to go to like 60% health, right? Then, if we Greatsword 2, the Greatsword 2, because we were at a higher health percentage than him, we get the Oppressive Superiority. And in fact, just while doing anything, even while using our Axe Auto attacks, after the first Axe Auto goes through, he hasn't hit me yet, so I'm getting Oppressive Superiority. So it's pretty much another 10% damage modifier for us most of the time, right? And particularly while merged, you know, you're getting all those other things at the same time. Even this guy, even though overall he has way more health than me, right now, for example, he's probably got more than 17,000 health. Because his health threshold is lower than mine, we're constantly getting that, and that's why we see random 10Ks coming out of Winter's Bite, right? So this is a good trait. It definitely is. But it is only a 10% damage modifier. If you are finding that you're a little bit too squishy, perfectly viable is also Leader of the Pack, right? You won't feel the damage drop that much. You really won't. And in situations where you struggle a little bit and you do start taking a bit of damage, or if you just feel slightly too squishy, I think this is a really strong choice. So our utility skill, the Mower Stance, will now last way longer, 150%, you can see there. We also can share it now to allies. That doesn't really matter that much. But if you look, while we're traded with this, Mower Stance lasts 15 seconds, and it recharges in 25 when you take the trait. It's a very, very big difference to when you don't have the trait. So now our uptime of super high concentration is really, really turbocharged. And it's pretty good. You can even, if you're running this, swap out the elite into one wolf pack if you like. Which will now also last longer and do more things. But I think the stability from strength of the pack is kind of nice. The thing is, while we have a stun break, we're often using it like as soon as possible, right? So that we can keep refreshing our quickness and keep the quickness going. Quickness. So, in general, you kind of feel like you don't have a stun break, and that's where all this crazy, absurd stability suddenly starts feeling really useful. So my main recommendation is just take the extra 10% damage all the time, but don't overlook lead of the pack too fast. So there you go, guys. That's the build. That's the way that it works. That's how you basically kill through aggression on a ranger build with very, very, very quick damage. Oh, we missed the worldly impact there. You have basically like 5 massive spike tools on this. You've got Winter's Bite, which is sort of okay. You've got Whirling Defense, which is massive damage. You've got Worldly Impact, which is massive damage. You've got GS2, which is massive damage, especially when followed up after a Hilt Bash. And you also have, to round it out, those absurdly strong, just constant auto attacks that bounce through targets and keep doing big damage. What more could you want? Well, maybe a little bit more sturdiness, but then you have all the big disengage from the bird. Soulbeast is one of those builds and classes, actually, at the moment. It just has pretty much everything it needs to round it out all the time, and is actually pretty fun. So there you go. That's the way I like to play it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any recommendations or changes, and in the description you guys should be able to find a code to load this template in for yourself. If you have any questions about gear or the best way to build your precision value to the right strength, what kind of foods and whatnot can complement this, I do have another video dedicated to that at the start of the playlist that you guys may like to check out. Until then, guys, I'll see you for the final class, that is the Necromancer, on the next one. Cheers, everybody. I'll see you then.